Okay, this is Jim. This is Jim Ledoux. We're just starting a little bit early here. I want to see if I can do audio checks on anybody that's attended. So I've unmuted. I see one attendee. That's Joseph. Joseph, do you want to see if we can hear you? Okay, I don't hear you. If you want to dial in using the phone number provided, you might be able to speak to us and we can have a discussion then. All right, so we're going to wait here another few minutes for other people to show up. And oops, I got that window to show this one. And we'll go ahead and pull up some of my past model data just to go ahead and review some of the that recent storm there, which I think was on March 30th. So we'll go to 18C March 29. See if that works out. I might have to go a little bit earlier to 18C March 28th. That looks a little bit better. All right, this is Jim. Let's see if we can hear you, Joseph. Do you want to go ahead and see if speak up and then see if we'll get your audio? Okay. If not, we're going to go ahead and go through a discussion here, and we'll start right about now. This is Jim, and welcome to the last session here on the Winter Forecast Challenge in 2019. The challenge ends at the end of this week, so we're in the last few days, and there's still snow going on around the area, which is a good sign at least that winter is still going on in some places, although some people would just prefer to see it go away. Believe we have a few people on here, but we're going to go ahead and just keep running until we get a few more. It won't be a long discussion because this is really just a wrap-up session. And we want to talk about our thoughts about what has gone on here. And so we have Matt Sankiewicz, who's developed the website and the forecast scoring methods, along with Chris Benagle, who's been monitoring in the background as far as helping get the forecasts in and scored. And so that just leaves me, Jim, which basically I serve as the figurehead for all of this. The hard work is done by everybody else. So I don't know, as far as we've seen right now, and this is the premise of the discussion today, is first of all, there's the way to really do well in this game, and there are probably similarities between how we do this game and how to score well versus that of the semi-official but still experimental probability of winter precip forecast, which is going to be the go-to guidance system for snowfall forecasts throughout the Weather Service within the next couple of years. And it's using a multi-model blend, soon to be the national blend of models, which involves multiple numerical models and multiple statistical models, basically model output statistics in some places. So this is a kind of a stretch goal, is to beat that PWPF. That's the point at which we add human value. So that's one of them. But the game that we have here has some similarities, differences, and of course, some people actually knew pretty well to figure out how to score well in this game. And I think that's something that we can talk about. And at this point here, Matt, you produced a couple scoring systems here, and one of them is the Breyer score. And maybe if you want to go ahead and explain that to us, and then we'll figure out what it all means, what the implications are. So yeah, Matt, what you do to create the Breyer score here for all the forecasters?
So this is the squared difference between for a given threshold. So here you've got greater than or equal to 6 inches. There's the squared difference between all the forecasts that a user has submitted, the probabilities that they prescribe to greater than or equal to 6 inches of snowfall, minus the observed frequency of all those observed values. So for every forecast you gave, how many times was the observed value greater than or equal to 6 inches? So if you take the squared difference between those two and sum them up and divide them by the total number of forecasts, you can do that also for the PWPF, which we've got for everybody's forecast. And you can calculate a Breyer skill score, which is if it is equal to 0, it represents no skill relative to the reference forecast, which again is the PWPF. If it is negative, it is negative skill relative to the PWPF, and if it's positive, it is positive skill relative to the PWPF.
Yep. Yeah, so at this point, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say that you can see the majority of the Breyer skill scores are negative, and that represents certain over-aggressiveness of the human forecasters due to the scoring nature of the challenge itself relative to the PWPF. And
so we do have
there is the all forecasts value, which just shows every forecast. Yeah, you can find that.
There it is, right here.
Right there, so all 2,129 forecasts to date, scoring about a minus 0.2 for a Breyer skill score.
Very good. So forgive me for interrupting. What this really means here is that we have what appears to be, for this threshold, this is 6 inches or greater, majority of the forecasters are going negative. And of course, what this kind of implies, it doesn't imply that we're losing value to the PWPF, because it is a slightly different game and slightly different motivations. But it does kind of highlight a few things here, at least in terms of what the differences are. Are we really replicating what the PWPF is and so forth? We can go through other examples as well as we rummage through some forecasters' forecasts in the past, and then take a look at also the reliability scores. So I see at this point here, all forecasts have a slightly negative value, but there are people that are actually doing better than that if we go up here, including actually one person from WDTD, surprisingly.
Yep, that's me.
Congratulations. Yep. I don't know if I would have beaten that, so I'm going to say hats off to you. So this in general, if we go through, and I'm going to go ahead and show a couple more thresholds here. So we'll start off with 2 inches. So in this case here, if you're greater than or equal to 2 inches, probabilities, calculating those skill scores. Again, we see it's only a few people actually are beating the PWPF at this point, which is basically only 3 people. But there's also
Yeah,
an
if I
incentive
could say
not to
something
just do
about
that,
that,
right? Yeah,
if I can say something about that,
sure.
so yeah, I'm the first one there. I deliberately took the approach of giving broad conservative PDFs for all of my forecasts. So
Exactly.
I would, and I also forecasted mostly for higher values. So for the greater than 2 inch threshold, it was probably almost certainly 100% for me most of the time. Um,
Correct.
and then the other one there that is one of the other ones there that's positive is the SREF, which is, I assume, getting its probabilities from the model itself. So it's not tailoring its probabilities to be the minimum, which most participants are doing in order to score points. It's actually using the model, assessing what the probabilities are for that threshold, and assigning a forecast accordingly. So I think that would be why that one is there as well. And then you see
Okay.
a lot of negative because people are being very aggressive. The human forecasters are mostly, for the most part, being very aggressive.
Exactly. And there's also the conversely the other end of the spectrum. If we go to 12 inches, we find some 1.0 Breyer skill scores and an awful lot of positives.
Yes. And that the 1.0s there are basically saying that those participants very rarely or never forecasted anywhere up close to 12 inches. So the probability of greater than or equal to 12 inches was always 0. And as long as they never had an observed value greater than or equal to 12 inches, their Breyer score was perfect, and therefore whatever relative to whatever the PWPF was, their Breyer skill score was also perfect.
That's right. So there are a few abstracts and artifacts in this that kind of takes and requires a need for careful analysis. Yeah, Matt, that sounds really good. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and go over to the reliability standings here. Now, this is a little bit different. This is something that we're not giving awards out to, but it shows our forecast compared to the actual observed. And the whole idea here, if we're looking at this, is that we want our probabilities to be consistent and sort of calibrated and reliable. And reliable meaning that if we're forecasting a 50% chance of greater than a certain amount of snow, we'd expect to actually see 50% of the time meet that threshold, so to speak. And also, this kind of thing should go across the board. So what we're seeing here is the comparison. And Matt, thank you very much for doing this for the PWPF. I don't know if it certainly was probably a little bit of a challenge to get this programmed in, but
A
it
little
did.
bit.
Yeah, I can imagine. But I think the results really stand out, and it's really nice to see the comparison between the PWPF and then the forecast from the participants. And all of us, including the PWPF, are a little bit on the aggressive side, aren't we?
Yep. Yeah, that's the game. And I think one challenge going forward is we need to figure out how to mitigate that difference between the motivations to score points and the motivations to have reliable forecasts.
Yep, exactly. So we're in a situation here where we're all aggressive. We tend to wind up being a little bit optimistic, I guess. Now, if we go across the board here, and I'll shift over to the 6 inches, there's a lot of good parity here in the low probabilities for forecasting greater than or equal to 6 inches. Then forecasters tend to be a little bit more aggressive on the high side here, the higher probabilities. And I think here at 8 inches, it's very good agreement actually between the PWPF and forecast. We're both equally aggressive, too aggressive. If we get up to a certain point, we still have sufficient numbers here to look at it. It's getting a little bit bouncy, but still excellent agreement between the two. If I go down to 2, you can see that forecasters, again, in this case here, not too many forecasts. I think we have a limited range, but we tend to be a little bit more aggressive than the PWPF. So overall, there's an interesting comparison between those two, and it does show that we are, in general, I won't say wish casters, but I'd say we are optimists, at least in terms of how much. So it's an interesting one, and I guess the question is what do we do about this over next time, and do we want or wish to make this more realistic as to how and how to motivate people to forecast more like the PWPF in terms of probabilistic forecasts? And just as a kind of put this into context, I might pick up a sample event here, and this is in the past, and let's just pick up one random forecast here, and we can see what typically happens here. In this case, we wind up somebody that has actually, for the expected snowfall, we've got let's see, expected snowfall of roughly 4 inches or so, and we have a 2.5 to 5.5 inch range. I mean, that's roughly like 3 to 6 inches. That's a typical forecast we've seen before. But in this case here, the spread wasn't wide enough. So often, I think we see this a lot, don't we? Fairly narrow spreads and reasonable, because people want to score huge amounts of points. If you put the expected right on top of the 4 inch, you get bonus points if you score. So that's something else. So I think that's what we want to go for and think about in terms of the spread here. So I see we have somebody else on, and I've unmuted everybody that's on here. So if you do have a question or anything like that, based on that, you can certainly see if we can hear your audio. And let me see, Mark, you had a question here. Let's see if we can hear you. And if not, you might want to consider going over to the phone instead. Okay. So I'm going to get to your question. I'll just say, I'll talk about it here. I'll just restate your question. And Mark is asking, is the higher melt potential in spring leading to reduced snow amounts, such as if the snow falls earlier in the period, then melts during the afternoon, will it come out to 0 for the forecast period? And the question is, does that affect these scores? Because, we're winding up with, perhaps less than what's forecasted an awful lot of times. And this, Mark, I'll say, we had a discussion like this with the folks that create the verification, and they say they don't actually consider whether the report comes in during the max depth or during a fixed period of time during the day, as long as it comes in time before they do their analysis. So some of that might get in, but they do an outlier check, and the outliers are thrown out. So when you consider the outliers from other observations, the buddy check, as well as from the estimated snowfall from the stage 4, where there's stage 4 data and where it's unreliable, it's really actually from the HER model to begin with. So there may be impacts, but it's unknown at this point, at least, what that happens. We need examples, actual examples, to show what happens there. So anyway, that's as best an answer as I can come up with. But at least at this point here, getting back to this, I was wondering about this range problem and the incentives that we're creating here. So I don't know if we had any thoughts, but one person, Mike Evans, did have an observation that we are promoting narrow ranges, and we're promoting them fairly frequently. So does anybody, Mark or Chris, do you have any thoughts about that? What we could do to help alleviate that, or at least shift it towards an incentive system that where we want to go?
I would say that at the very least, so we've got that 15-point bonus for the greater than or equal to 4-inch threshold. We could institute a more progressive bonus system, so that say greater than or equal to 8 inches is a larger bonus, and then 12 inches is even larger, and so on, to try to get people to forecast for larger totals, and then hopefully, therefore, you would also see wider ranges associated with that. That would be the answer to me.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to step on you, Matt. Especially since I was more or less agreeing with you. I mean, the idea is likely going to be you're going to want to incentivize the forecast you're looking for by placing extra points in the forecast range that you want to see, or the behavior. You want to reward the behavior you want to see, but with bonus points, right? So
yeah.
Whatever you're looking for, you would kind of slant the rules in the direction of the behavior you want to see. We sort of do that in the severe weather version, but in that there's really no desired behavior. We just want people to be right. So the bonus points just reward difficulty in that instance. And I don't know that we necessarily reward difficulty on this side, but you can do that by, if you want a wider range, then give a bonus for you hit within a certain percentage of your range or something like that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. That would be by far the simplest answer to this issue. And I've been thinking a lot about this. You can actually, like we calculated by your skill scores, you can calculate a reliability value or a skill score for everybody. But my fear is that then that would dissuade additional forecasting, and that people would not want to hurt their score. So we always want to encourage participation here, and I just don't know how to reconcile that with using a legitimate probabilistic scoring method.
Well, yeah, that's the one thing I wondered about, whether that was the case. But we also have your reliability scores, and this one requires large numbers of forecasts to generate a decent reliability diagram, for example. So is there some way we could use this to help leverage an incentive to keep forecasting?
Potentially, yeah. But yeah, my fear is that once you have a good reliability curve, you would then be incentivized to stop forecasting.
What if you gave an extra bonus to people who met both criteria?
Yeah, that's okay. You merge the two methods.
Yeah. Right. If you forecast at least X number of times and fall within Y range, you get a bonus of Z points.
Okay. Yeah. Some sort of hybrid approach where the reliability scores or the buyer skill scores are like an added bonus on top of the original scores, I think would work. Could work.
Yeah, I'm looking at the reliability scores, and they're very noisy, at least at this point. So it'd have to require quite a few forecasts to actually get anywhere close to being somewhat smooth, somewhat realistic. But yeah, it might be something where we have if an overall score requires a certain contribution of reliability and also, the actual value, these kinds of forecasts here, this kind of scoring might work out. But how that will happen, I mean, there's always a possibility that something unintended might occur. I mean, I wasn't thinking about this before, but there's still that range issue that we have to figure out. The range of forecasts, people play that game by going as low as possible. So it seems like we'd have to have also that bonus system in there to promote forecast ranges, something
Yeah.
like that.
Then my only fear there is that at some point, if you're stacking scoring methods on top of scoring methods, then the actual scores become so convoluted that nobody can understand how to really participate.
That is the danger of it. So
Yeah.
I think we want to tread lightly. Yeah. Oh, we have a few people on here, but if you have any ideas, if you want to go ahead and chime in anytime, that's certainly you are welcome to. At least at this point, the whole idea, of course, is to prevent this. I've seen at least. What if I go here to, let's say, standings? Let's go to standings, and then we see the overall highest score. And so let me just go ahead and pick forecaster Bill Mead. Look at this snowfall forecast. They're all blue except for one, which probably was, if I wouldn't be surprised, an early one. So if you go down here, the one thing we notice, probably lots of points here. A couple of them have been rejected due to our rules of dropping the lowest two. So what do you think about that when we drop the lowest two out of forecast that week? Do you think there's anything unintended there that's coming about?
So we're only keeping the highest two, and this leads
Excuse me,
to
the
the
highest
issue
two,
of like,
yes.
yeah, and people have discovered, and they discovered this last year, that as long as you forecast almost every day, you just throw a sheer number of volume of forecasts at the wall. All you need are two of them to hit well, and
That's right.
and then you're set for the week. So yeah, so all those zeros on there, people don't seem to mind at all.
No,
And
they don't.
the
Yep.
idea is, yeah, we want them to start minding.
And here's an example
Ideally.
here. We got this. Let me go ahead and view this one here. It's a zero forecast. Well, look at that. Gee, that looks like the same one I just looked at. We get the expected 4 inches. The observed 2.23. Oh, darn, it fell just outside of the range. But again, the expected being at 4 inches. Very close. If we look at all the expected values, they're the same all the way up, except for this one, which I think that's the one up in Lake Ontario. Otherwise, everything else, carefully crafting the forecast to go right to the lowest possible expected value to score those extra 15. And you see there's a mode of greater than 100 points per each one, which is awfully hard to do otherwise, because we got this one. You look at 100 points. Well, 100 points would demand zero range unless you get those extra 15 bonus points. Though in this case, he went pretty darn low right there, hoping to get some more. So it definitely disincentivizes the high end snowfall forecasts. If you really want to score an awful lot of points. Yeah, here's another example. Oh, look at that, plugged right on. And again, 2.5 to 5.5. You pick an event, especially that has stratiform precip, fairly smooth over pretty much calm terrain, and with high confidence in the SREF, and I think you wind up with a pretty good strategy.
And as I mentioned earlier, the SREF bot, I'm blanking on the name of the person who codes that up, but it looks like they code it up in a similar way to target that 4-inch expected value. But since they're pulling the low end and the high end from the SREF probabilities themselves and not setting it to the minimum allowable range, that's why the SREF consistently had a better prior skill score than most forecasters.
Yes, yes. If I keep going through this forecaster's snowfall, you see you wind up with the same kind of forecast all the time. Yeah, exact range and everything else. You just pick the same range and just go around, and as you say, look for the SREF to match. Though it's interesting, this person here is actually probably missed just because he picked a little bit too close to the terrain. That makes it difficult too if you wind up in an area with high gradients. So is there anything we want to do in terms of the future, like changing the number of forecasts dropped, for example? Understanding that we do want to get high participation, and so therefore, we can't demand everybody forecast all the time.
Yeah, I've had a tough time trying to reconcile that in my own head. We could, have a larger number of allowed forecasts per week, but then if you actually sit down and seriously go through the forecast process, starting from scratch, it does not take a short amount of time. And I worry that we would see a dip in participation from a large percentage of the participants.
Yes, exactly.
So yeah, I'm open.
Go ahead, Chris.
Go ahead, Matt. The only way I could see, changing some of that would be going away from weekly scores. And you'd say over the course of the challenge, you make X forecasts. It kind of would mess with team scores and standings and things like that. We'd have to redesign how we run things. But if you want to go, that route, you probably would have to get away with weekly scores and change the way you do it that way. That's the only way I can think of it.
I think I agree with that. It would just be a little difficult because I would worry about a drop in interest throughout the 8 or 10 weeks of the challenge.
Yeah, because people want to see their scores and they want to see them in real time.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. So that could be it. I want to give a chance at least. We got a few people on here, and if anybody can give us maybe any input or something like that, please, you're welcome to interrupt at any time. We're here for you, and if you have an idea or anything like that, so much the better. But please go ahead and comment. I would like to hear at least, especially, what motivates you to keep forecasting, and do any of our ideas come out? Would they potentially hurt that motivation? Because the first thing is we want to keep people forecasting, and I think the secondary goal is to actually allow a more realistic scoring. Some kind of scoring that matches better with how people are going to be doing it for real in operations. So you're welcome to chime in anytime. You can, if you don't have a audio connection or something like that, you can go ahead and put in or submit a question or a comment in that question box. So I'll give you a chance to do that. And let me go ahead and just go through. I think overall, I certainly don't want to disincentivize. And so this is something I think we're going to go ahead and consider again for a while, so that whatever we say today isn't going to be the answer or anything like that. So let me just go ahead and check down the road here and see if we have any comments. I might just go down, talk a little bit, and see if Joseph, can you talk? Can we hear you?
Hey, this is Joe at WPC. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, good
Hi,
deal.
Joe.
Yeah. Hey, good to hear you. Saw you guys last week. I'd say this challenge went really well. From one aspect, just the website layout and all the work you guys put into it really showed. I liked seeing the PWPF added. I don't know when that got added, maybe over the last couple of weeks, but it was kind of neat to see that. You can really see the sort of aggressiveness of the PWPF against our aggressiveness too. As for scoring methodology, I don't have much to offer there, but seeing the scores updated as we went along was nice, and I think it definitely did keep my interest in it, just amongst the people here forecasting at WPC, and then against the teams across the nation.
Yeah, Joe, does that actually invoke any conversation at WPC about this game here that we have?
Probably not as much as you might think. I think a lot of the folks that were
Okay.
doing it were more on the development side anyway, but
Right. Yep. Or secretly being involved and didn't want to say anything. But
yeah, maybe that's the case.
yeah, understood. So yeah, so I mean, yeah, so that goes along with it, and going along with my concern, I do want to keep this engaged. That means feedback. I think it means frequent feedback as much as possible. I see Mark sent another question here, or a comment actually, which he states that a larger snowfall total is harder to hit with a narrow range. So obviously, the optimal strategy seems to be to go for those 4-inch amounts with no additional bonus for hitting a large storm. Yes, agreed. So would it be, I mean, out of control if we actually did forecast, let's say, a large amount, or add the bonus points for the large amounts? And I'll go ahead and ask and see what you think. Joseph, you can speak to us. I don't know if Carl can. Carl's on self-mute, so I can't hear.
It would be interesting to see sort of a staggered bonus system as the points increase as you get towards higher amounts. I did shy away often from forecasting over, I don't know, 8 or 10 inches, and I didn't want to cop out and just kind of do the 4-inch easy points all the time. But I did generally look at the PWPF probability of 4 inches and kind of go toward those areas,
Right.
so to make it easier on myself.
Right. Yeah, I found that out too. I forecasted for Flagstaff, and I went 20 inches. It was that big day in Arizona, and of course the airport came with 35. But the interesting thing is the no risk analysis didn't go for that 35. It was something like 25 or 26, and well, I still didn't make I still hit it. Actually, I was a little bit too low, even though I had the range extended out. So that was a tough one. That was kind of a slap in the face, because I went for 20 to 30, and if I did that here, I'm pulling it up, and I did something like this, and I put the high end there. Oh my gosh, look, there goes my expected total going way down.
Yep.
And I just said, screw it. I'm not in for the points. I want to forecast for Flagstaff and see what I could do. Of course, that was a record-breaking event, and that one typically forecasts have very high difficulty in dealing with. So
I was kind of surprised to hear you mentioned there's a 10-inch difference between the recorded amount and the no risk analysis.
There was, and oh my gosh, if I have to go back, I can take. Do you remember what date that was? I think it was in late February, but it's hard to remember. We covered this with an earlier discussion at the time, and if I go with the interpolated, if I go with just interpolated, and let's see if we hit February, I'm going to make a guess. And I missed.
Try February 20th or so.
Let me try February 20th here.
Oh, okay.
Missed it by that much. But let's see if we go February 19th. May have to go to the Flagstaff page here, and let me see. Let's see if we can
Might
get
be the 22nd. Try the 22nd.
Okay, hang on a second. Let me get the 22nd. That's close. I believe that's fairly close there. That's interpolated snowfall forecast 24 hours. So if we go to just total snow, and I believe this is it will redraw and show the points for this time. And of course, it takes some time to load up here, so stand by. Right, so let's go zoom in on Flagstaff really far. And you can see there's a large disparity of snowfall reports. I don't think this is the day, but I think we get the point here. So it was, essentially, if you look at that.
Oh, you were on the 0Z? Try the 12Z.
Yeah, let me get to 12Z here, 22nd. Yeah, closer. So there's a lot of, let's see, a Flagstaff there, 20. There's a 20 just to the south. And then there's a 15 and 21. But, the Flagstaff office had literally 35 inches marked. It was pretty close to that. But again, it's, you can see the sharp disagreement even amongst individual points. But if we go to the interpolated one, stand by. It gets all merged, essentially fairly close. I mean, it's got an 18-inch here and a 20-inch to the south, so forth. So it tries its best to kind of reconcile those. But the weightings of the observations is often, in many cases, less. And then it's only those observations that have chef coding. And also, they don't include LSRs. So there are a lot of those that don't go in here. And it seems to be an issue with forecast offices out in the West. I know Boulder commented on that, as well as Cheyenne. So that's something that they're going to look into. And as actually as a result of these discussions here, by the way, this is something that the no-risk folks and the SUs in those places are going to look at this and see what can be done. So it may be that we've had an impact on how things are going to be done in the near future.
That's good.
Okay, we're coming up on 40 minutes after the hour. So at this point here, obviously we don't have an answer. This is something we'll have to consult with, and we'll probably go ahead and solicit feedback from all the participants with their thoughts in other ways so that we can get their input. But in the meantime, for those of you that are on here, do you have any other parting comments or anything like that you'd like to share, at least at this point?
Joe again at WPC. I'd say, yeah, just awesome setup what you guys have now, and looking forward to participating again next year.
Joe, thank you very much for participating this time around. It's good to have WPC folks in this loop. And this is something, I guess we'll have a meeting. It's going to be in May, and we'll review the winter weather training and so forth. So we'll bring this up here, and hopefully, Matt, you can attend that at the same time. So it'd be really good to have you up there and presenting this.
Yeah, I can head over there.
Okay, that'd be great. All right, there's nobody else and no other questions. I don't see any coming up on the question box at this time. So at least right now, I'm going to go ahead and slowly say thank you all for attending, and I'll thank all the participants for sticking with it, even as we go into April. Some of you have been doggedly persistent in forecasting multiple times. We're still getting 30 people a day coming in, which is pretty good. So other than that, I think we've covered all the basics, and so we'll go ahead and sign off here. And until next year, we'll meet again probably in January, and hopefully we'll have smooth sailing without any interruptions to service, and we'll have our our challenge in more of the core of winter to potentially add more cases. So thank you very much, and we'll talk to you later. And everybody
Thank
have
you.
a good day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Jim. All right.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Jim.
Good day, Matt.